So we're going to talk about compatibility. There's two major issues when it comes to compatibility. One is the basic fundamental file type may be different. For 03 and before, it's a binary file type. For 07, 10, and 13, it's an open XML type. So that's one issue. The other issue is that with each subsequent version of Excel, there's enhancements to the functionality that isn't available in prior versions. So we have a compatibility checker to check for those sorts of issues for handling backwards compatibility. For forward compatibility, Excel opens up in compatibility mode, which we're going to take a look at. And finally, there's a compatibility pack that you can install into your 2003 version to open up files that were created in 07, 10, and 13. So I've got a workbook that I created in 2013. I have some data. I created a pivot table, and then I created a timeline, which is a new type of slicer that's a functionality that's available in 2013 and not in prior versions. So let's say my intention is to save the spreadsheet, and I know the person that's going to be opening it up has a prior version of Excel, and I want to know what kind of issues I may run into. What you can do is run the compatibility checker. You can go to File, and on the Info tab, left-click Check for Issues, and the third option is Check Compatibility. What we get is a compatibility report. And even though there isn't much going on in this workbook, I've got what seems to be quite a list here. So you can maintain a copy of this report in the workbook. By copying it to a new sheet, it preserves the information and provides some hyperlinks to take you to the place in the workbook where the compatibility issue is. So what would happen if I saved this workbook in the current file format and opened it up in 2010, knowing that 2010 does not have the timeline functionality? When I open up this workbook in 2010, I get a placeholder that tells me the timeline works in Excel 2013 or higher. There isn't any higher yet, but do not move or resize. So as long as I don't touch this, the placeholder will be preserved, and when I open up this workbook back in 2013, I'll have my timeline back. So you can run the compatibility checker in the backstage area, but the compatibility checker will also run automatically if I try to save this workbook in a prior version format. And to do that, I'm going to go to Alt-F-A, the Save As dialog box, and save this workbook in a 97-2003 format. And when I save it, I get another compatibility report, which ironically looks about as long as the first one. I'm going to copy this compatibility report to a new sheet, so I have two of them. Go back to sheet 1, do that again, and actually save it this time. So now I'm going to open up this workbook in the old format in the new version of Excel, forward compatibility. So when I do that, Excel opens up the workbook in compatibility mode. I've still got my placeholder for the timeline, and I am in 2013. But in compatibility mode, Excel does not make available that functionality that isn't consistent with the functionality that's supported by the prior version of Excel. In this case, it's 2003. So when I go to Data and look at the relationships and the data tools, that's grayed out because that's a 2013 enhancement. The Insert, there's a lot grayed out. Office Apps, Power View, the Spark Lines, and the Filters, which contains the slicer and the timeline. So the final thing we're going to talk about is the Compatibility Pack, which is something that's available on the HansensOffice.com website for people that have 2003, so that they can actually open up the files that were created in 07, 10, and 13 that's in the new open XML format. They, of course, won't be able to avail themselves of the new functionality because it didn't exist in 03, but at least they can open up the files. So that's backwards and forwards compatibility. We talked about the compatibility checker and how you can run it manually, or how it will actually run automatically if you try to save your file in a prior format. We talked about forward compatibility, where Excel will open up a spreadsheet in compatibility mode and prevent you from being able to utilize functionality that's not supported by the prior versions of Excel. And finally, the Compatibility Pack, which is something to help out people with 2003 version of Excel open up the files that were created after '03.